Hey guys, this is my latest review of The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, Part 3, Episode 4, Chapter 24. The episode is called The Hare Moon, and this one is going to be a pretty short review because I don't have a great deal to say about this episode, and I think it's easily the worst of the four so far in this part. I think it's really weak actually. It didn't do much for me. Certainly one of the weakest episodes I've seen, bar one or two scenes of the whole show. So I mean, this is one of those shows that had a slow start and then has picked up pace and has remained pretty consistently enjoyable throughout. But yeah, this is the worst episode I've seen in a while, I think. So the main plot concerns Zelda and the rest, Sabrina, concerned about the fact that the Covenant have lost their powers, obviously. They still haven't returned, so they're concerned about how to get them back. And they get together in a group, and Ambrose works out that it's actually the Dark Lord who's responsible, who of course is chained in the basement. So they go to him to try and get answers, to try and get him to help them restore their powers, but he's obviously reveling in it, not gonna give them the information they want. So they do some more research and they go to Dorian Gray. Is it I know they go to him at one point for another moment. Do they go to someone else first? It might have been through Ambrose and the oh, it's Madam Satan. That's it. I was trying to remember who it was. Yeah, that they went to see Madam Satan, thinking she'll have the answers. And she reveals to them that Lord Blackwood or Lord the Dark Lord. I always get these things. The Dark Lord was born with heavily blood, essentially, so that's why he could ascend to the throne, why he could ascend to hell. And so they kind of come up with this idea that well, if they can get some heavenly blood, then they can restore their powers. So Ambrose, and yes, there's a lot of Ambrose in this episode, sadly. Ambrose and Sabrina go to Dorian Gray. This is the scene where they visit him, and their whole plan is to, I mean, they ask him and he says, yeah, I can get celestial blood, as he calls it, from this client of mine who he has unconscious, and they sort of feed off him and he's getting the blood, and the idea is to get enough blood for the whole covenant, and that's the plan to restore their powers. Now this is where it gets a little bit contrived, because Sabrina hears like noises from the other room, and it sounds pretty serious, and she charges in, and I mean, Dorian Gray is being all mistress, and he revels in what Sabrina sees, and it's of course Nick. So Nick, in this episode, we see him continuing to go to the dark side, continuing to go and see Dorian Gray, and drinking these dark little potions. We see we see Nick still tortured by his experience in hell. Um, so Sabrina basically walks in on him having this weird sort of like SMM type sex with these. I mean, they look like sort of casts off from like the recent Cats movie. Yes, they look that freaky, but it yeah, he's having this weird S&M sort of sex, and yeah, it does look quite sort of strange, and it obviously freaks her out, and she's just pissed, obviously, and storms out. And the double whammy is that then Dorian, while she's in the other room, has started like gorging on the blood, so there's not enough blood for the whole convent, so they have to come up with another plan. So these are kind of contrivances. And what is happening is it's kind of moving them closer to this carnival cult, bringing their sort of plots together. So that they have this ritual, this some sort of like festival, which is tradition, where they go and have a picnic in the woods, and they sing some songs. And actually, the start of this might be the highlight of the episode, because you get them dressed in like kind of like I'm not sure the term I'm looking for, but like the sort of the hats and the type of brightly coloured attire, kind of like march sort of dancing, that kind of thing. And yeah, it's like a musical number in the middle of the episode, where it's this quite sort of hypnotic, sort of playful little song. And these scenes in the woods and this sort of ritual is very much, it seems to be like riffing off the recent horror movie Midsummer, and obviously has an air of the Wicker Man to it. And that definitely pans out later on when we find out more about this carnival cult. So they do this thing in the woods, and Nick shows up as well. Even though Sabrina's obviously pissed at him, Nick is like, yeah, I just wanted to be a part of this. So they reluctantly let him stay. And then what happens is they're interrupted by the carnival folks in the middle. And at the time, they obviously they don't know who they are, and they don't really see them as a threat. They're just new, and I think they're suspicious. Why are they interrupting our festivities? So they are kind of suspicious, and I guess Sabrina already knows from going to the carnival. Although I guess the only thing that happened to her there was the the whole thing in the tunnel of love, and that was a different thing. That was with the swamp creature, as I call him. So anyway, what then happens is the various characters from the covet start talking to these various characters from the carnival, and slowly their sort of dark magic starts coming out. And there's this particular thing where Dorcas, yes, that great name, Dorcas, starts flirting with Nick. She starts kind of teasing him about his sort of issues, and him going off doing this weird sort of sex stuff with the demons. And Nick loses it once again. Throughout this episode, he is like broody and angst ridden and just, yeah, just a misery to be around. So he just snaps at Dorcas, and out of nowhere her leg is suddenly like hurt. She's down on the ground in a lot of pain. And then what happens is the snake charmer lady from the carnival, she like sinks her teeth into Dorcas's ankle, and the idea is then she's gonna inject like snake venom into her. So the next thing you know, Nick basically kills the snake. You don't see it happen, but he comes back, says this snake won't be harming anyone again, and he's basically snapped it in half, and that obviously sets the snake charmer off. You know, you murderer and all that. So yeah, that's an interesting scene. But then in the next scene, the next time we return to this, Zelda, despite the fact that they've decided that this carnival, these characters are dangerous, and they actually work out then they are pagan witches, which appears to be where we're going with this now. And the episode explains that they are from the old order of things, you know, way back before things developed, before like magic and that developed. So that they're very like traditional to the roots, and at least in this world are seen as like being dangerous and a threat. I mean, Ambrose, who is in on fine form or horrible form, depending on your point of view, does a lot of explaining the plot in this episode. But basically, Zelda says it's probably not wise to get them offside. It's probably we need to keep, even though they're dangerous. But well, that's why we need to keep them on side. So she suggests sending them over some food as a peace offering. Sort of almost being quite naive, because when you know they're that dangerous and there's already been a heated thing, but you can understand her thinking anyway. And Nick is again being very hyper. He's being like, but I haven't done anything wrong, all this sort of thing. And I mean, at this point, things explode with him and Sabrina. Sabrina sort of gives him a talent too, even though she's being quite sympathetic, and she kind of realizes that this is Nick still being affected by his experiences in hell. But this leads to the worst scene of the episode, and something which really bugs me, because you know him and Sabrina have it out, and then Nick just goes on this terrible little rant, and it you know, it's a lot of screaming. It's very sort of self-loathing, because what happens is he starts recounting his experiences in hell, and so you know, sort of saying at one point he comes out with this singer which is basically justifying him cheating on Sabrina, him having this sex with the demons, just saying, you know, it's not as if it's not like you're giving me much of this, and it's like, shut up, Nick. And this is the problem with this whole storyline and this part of it, is even though we know it's not really Nick and Nick has been changed by all this, the problem is then the way it plays in this episode is that it sort of justifies his actions, and worse, it kind of makes Sabrina into the sort of bad party almost. Sort of, in some ways it does, because she almost excuses what he does. I mean, even if she thinks there's a reasonable explanation, and I mean, logically, there's not, because it's not like he's being forced to like go to Dorian Gray and indulge in all these black arts and I mean, it does remind me a bit of the plot with Riley in Buffy in the 5th season, when he feels neglected by Buffy, and he does a similar thing to Nick. He does pretty much the same thing, actually, except with vampires and what have you. It goes to a vampire brothel, and I thought that the way that storyline played out was a bit off, because it did kind of justify what Riley did, and it felt unbalanced anyway. It felt like it was putting blame on Buffy when there really wasn't any, even though you could understand Buffy was pulling away from Riley, then she was neglecting him. There's definitely a case to be made. The problem was that still doesn't justify Riley's actions, and he still could have went and talked to her. And then to make it, I mean, it's this whole thing with the way he leaves the show with the ultimatum and all that, where he does act really bad. So I think this misses the mark in a similar sort of way, where even though we understand that there are certain circumstances, and there's still Sal in the whole, he's been to hell, he's been through this whole deal. I mean, as he lays it out, he didn't sleep a night there. He had Madam Satan and the Dark Lord messing with his head, or Lucifer. But he just goes on this self-indulgent, preachy sort of rant at Sabrina that kind of blames her almost. And I think because she is partly defending him, I think that does make it a little bit worse. But he's just being a jackass. And I mean, the problem with this storyline is just the fact that he's not the best actor in the world, and it kind of just feels like forced drama. I can understand why they're doing it, but so far it's been one of the weaker parts of this season, this part, if you like. So yeah, that's definitely a low point. But then later on they move on to the actual ceremony, which is, I mean, since they're in the woods anyway, and I think this is Helda's idea, because she's kind of has knowledge of all this. So the Hare moon of the title is to do with this ritual. So basically the coven all lay down facing the moon. And this scene, even though it's kind of a bit corny, it's kind of silly, but not in a fun way. But visually, the scene works really well. So they're all laying down, as I said, looking up at the moon, and Helda just does her thing. Lucy Davis, she just does the business with this this whole like ritual speech. So literally talking to the moon and like the spirit of the moon, and just commanding it, to give back their souls. Well, not their souls, but their powers. But it doesn't work out, and the reason it doesn't work is because we then cut to the pagan witches, as we can now call them, back at their carnival, and they and this is a really good scene actually, that they sort of all bite into like this big cake, this big chocolate like cake, but in reality what they're doing is they're eating the moon. So then we cut back and we see that the moon goes all dark, so they've made the moon dark, which means Sabrina and the rest are now vulnerable. So later on, the pagan witches show up at the covert, and they're at the door, and they're basically vulnerable. Sabrina and the rest are, and suddenly Dorcas shows up, but she's been made into stone, and this happened in the woods, although we didn't see the result until then, where Agatha was like sort of hypnotized by this like flute like demon, and Dorcas, who was bringing like the cake, the peace offering, some sort of food, was then the snake charmer essentially got a vengeance, and we've seen that she can turn people to stone. So she's turned Dorcas to stone. So I think this is meant to be playing on the whole Medusa like myth, the fact that she had snakes in her hair, and that if you look at her, she turns you to stone. So I think that's playing on the Medusa legend. So at this point, Zelda and the rest of them, they just realise, we're going to need some help here. So the idea is actually to release Lord Blackwood, the Dark Lord. I keep getting it, but it is Blackwood, but the Dark Lord, because I mean it's a nice line, because Ambrose sort of says, it's better the devil you know than the many devils you don't, or something like that. So the idea is that they're taking a gamble by releasing him, because he could just seize power of the Coven again. But it's maybe worth the risk, because he would be able to overpower these pagan witches easily. So Sabrina goes to let him out of the dungeon, but the twist at the end of the episode is that Nick is there, sort of laying in blood. He's exhausted, he's unconscious pretty much. And in the previous scene we've seen him, because throughout the episode he's like gone to the basement. During one scene he beat the Dark Lord up. Nick just losing control throughout, so he went to the basement in a previous scene to say I've had enough of this, and then the Dark Lord produced some sort of needle, saying, well, I've got something for you. And the next we know, Sabrina finds Nick in the basement in this sort of state. So the Dark Lord has disappeared. Nick is pretty much unconscious, certainly in a bad state, and we're not quite sure what's happened, because that's how they cut to credits. So that throws up that for Sabrina, and it also throws a spanner in the works, if you like, of them hoping to release the Dark Lord. So there you have it, and there's a few other snippets. Obviously on the other side of the plot we have, now Harvey finds out that the snake charmer woman went home with his dad. And that's kind of a thing, and when Harvey confronts her about it, she's like, well, we're both adults, and if you don't want me to reveal your dark secret to your father, then yeah, just be quiet and don't interfere with us. Now, what she means by Harvey's dark secret, I don't know. Whether she's meant to know about him and Roz, planning on having sex, or whether it's something else. Maybe just the fact that Harvey, looked at her a certain way at the carnival. I really don't know what that dark secret is meant to be. But in any case, that becomes a thing, and when they realise stuff is going down, Theo, Harvey and Roz decide to go to the carnival to investigate, and the place is pretty deserted. It's said that it's like their day off. But anyway, Roz goes inside the tent, the snake charmer's tent, and the plan is to just feel in there to get a sense, to get information, because Roz obviously has that power. But then she's surprised by the snake charmer, and the next thing you know, you sort of see her running out of the tent. And they decide obviously to clear out, but Roz is in a panic, and you see like three of like the pagan witches come together and do this weird. Robin shows up as well after Theo and the rest have left, but they start doing this little like weird little ritual with blood, and I think they've got the blood from Roz. And it's later when they get home, Roz is in a really bad way. She's really passed out and really high fever. And later on, because Sabrina isn't around at this point, obviously, but later on, Roz is turned to stone. So the same as Dorcas. So we see once again then this snake charmer woman has those powers. So yeah, Roz is also turned to stone. So it's at least up the stakes in that sense. But yeah, not a great episode for me. Not a lot of interesting things happening, and the Nick plot kind of went to a new low. Yeah, just not very interesting, this one, I have to say. So hopefully things will pick up next time. But that is my review of the 4th episode of part 3 of the Chilling Adventures. So thanks for watching this video. I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.